You know how we all get told that fans don't know better than coaches, coaches are coaches for a reason, fans are fans for a reason, blah, 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 blah. And certainly, sure, there is something to that, right? Like some of the specific X's and O's, fans just will not understand at the same level or depth as people in the NFL, NFL coaches, college coaches, etc. I concede that point, absolutely. However, sometimes that knowledge doesn't really manifest. And what I mean by that is, you could have all the X's and O's knowledge in the world, but sometimes you just don't know what the fuck you're doing. And when it comes to football, you see it time after time after time. And one thing that has struck me, and this probably isn't even going to be the only time you hear me kind of ramble and rant about this a little bit when talking about scouting reports and prospects for these guys coming out of college and getting ready to head into the NFL. This year in particular, I was astounded how many of these pass catchers and weapons struggled at times to get involved with their team's offenses. Like, that's really dumb dick coaching. Like, absolute stupidity. Perfect example, Quentin Johnston. Now, what he's going to be as an NFL prospect could be subject to a wide varying range of opinions. That said, the fact that TCU at times struggled to get the ball in his hands just points to, like, even for a team that ended up playing the national championship game, great coach, how fucking stupid they can be. It's not that hard to fucking say, hey, he's 6'3", can fly, and has great run after the catch ability. He's a great playmaker. Oh, duh, maybe we should manufacture more touches for him in the fucking offense. Now, is it that hard? As you look at Quentin Johnston, he certainly looks the fucking part. He's got the close to prototype size you want for the position at college, certainly in the NFL. He's got plenty of speed and quickness. He's a vertical threat in college. He was, and he's going to be at the NFL level. With good quickness off the line. Like, how in the fuck can you not find a way to get this guy more involved in the offense? Christ. Just saying. But talking about Quentin Johnston, he's one of these tricky evaluations. Because you have to be careful. Because sometimes a guy can look the part with certain respects, but their play doesn't necessarily match. Sometimes you can get caught up into the thought or belief of what a guy can be instead of what he actually is. My friend Chase Oliver sat there and said that he's not big on Quentin Johnston because he gives him some Kevin White vibes. And you know what? While I don't fully agree with that, I can certainly see that. I understand it. Although Kevin White primarily busted out because of injury, right? Unfortunate deal, but that's the thing. But Quentin Johnston is one of those guys that you look at him and you say, man, he could be, but man, there's a lot there that makes you wonder, right? He's one of those traditional height, weight, speed prospects, like I said, ideal kind of prototype stuff, right? He's got speed, quickness, so he could be an explosive playmaker at the NFL level. But when you watch his game, you say his hands are less than ideal. His route running needs some work. He struggles getting off the press at times due to being a bit of a long strider due to his size. For a guy of that size, you feel like he should be able to make more contested catches than he actually does. He's got to get better at utilizing his body and his frame on fades and back shoulders to shield off the defenders. For a guy of his size at that position, you'd expect him to play with better strength than he actually does. Again, not a great route runner, especially in terms of the expanse of his route tree. Now, you look at that and you say, okay, you counter that with a guy that if you get the ball in his hands, he can make things happen, but how well does that translate? I think about the guy that I compare him to ultimately, which is C.D. Lamb. Is a couple of years ago, coming out of Oklahoma, it's like C.D. Lamb is like, wow. But then you wonder, like, does some of that shit really translate to the NFL? And it did. But for every one guy like that, there are several guys that it absolutely doesn't. And you even look and you say, one thing that stood out to me about Quentin Johnston was his ability to draw pass interference penalties, which sounds great in theory until you say to yourself, hey, for a guy with quickness and speed like him, if he's drawing a ton of pass interference penalties, that also means he's not getting any fucking separation. You see what I mean? Yeah, like the thought of who Quentin Johnston is or could be, I think in some ways could be more appealing than what his reality might be. Now that said, in a wide receiver class that I don't look at as particularly great, I would much rather gamble on a Quentin Johnston's upside physically versus, like, let's say a Jackson Smith-Njigba, somebody like that. Fully possible in a couple of years we look back and say Quentin Johnston was a Josh Doctson-style bust in the NFL, and that could very well be. But I look at Johnston and I say, if he played in a better situation with a better quarterback, sure, but also with a coaching staff that better understood how to utilize his ass, maybe we wouldn't be having some of these debates and these conversations. Like, I've got a first-round grade on Quentin Johnston. It is not something where I feel like I'm in a spot where I'm pounding the table for him. But I saw the ability of when you get the ball in his hands, special things can fucking happen. And like C.D. Lamb a few years ago, that type of stuff does seem to find a way to translate to the NFL. If you get to a good place, a good situation, with a good coaching staff, you know, he could be that type of dude in the NFL. He could be a wide receiver one. He could also be a massive dick tease and disappointment. He's got a lot of work to do, but you could see the upside. You could see the potential. And that's what intrigues me about him. It's the traditional height, weight, speed stuff, but it's that run after the catch ability. The physicality he plays with as a blocker, like he's willing to support him in the running game. I like this kid. I'm not in love with him as a prospect, mind you. I do have a first-round grade on him, but, you know, I put that first-round grade as more of like I would take him in the 20s of this draft than I would in the top 10 or 15.